Hi, this is John Jorgensen with John on Tech. We are starting to develop these Python recipe application, and what this is an application that are going to be containing a lot of Python recipes, meaning Python uh, ways of doing things, Python things that you will find useful over time. So we'll keep expanding it as we go. And right now, we're going to go over the structure of this application. So let me collapse everything first, and then we'll walk through the application as it is right now. So at the top level, we have the project. So this is the project, this Python project is called Python underscore recipes. And you can see this is the location on the hard drive for this. I separate different things on my hard drive by topic. So I put this in what I call business. And then I have, this is also managed by Git. So I checked into a Git repository, and I will put the Git repository into the description so that you can download this and you can see how this evolves over time. So at the first level here, we have the config folder, and this is a Python config file, and I've just set up it as application properties at this point, and it has two sections. So Python properties typically are divided into sections. So you have a database connection section and a file transfer section. So this could be anything really, and for this particular example, I have just chosen two sections here, and I put in a couple of simple properties here. So let's move it into the uh, folders below here, and we see we have a source. So this is the source file. So if you were to develop this application for a production deployment, then everything in the source will go into the production. But we also have a test, also a test directory here, and that does not go into production. But that is very useful because we can use unit tests to drive and check our implementation in Python, just as we can do this in Java and other applications. As a matter of fact, those of you that are familiar with Java will be very familiar, you will feel right at home with the implementation of the Python testing that comes right out of the box, that comes with Python 3x when you install it. So I'm just expanding this now. And there is one more here that we can also expand, but this is what's called a Python virtual environment. More to say about this in later videos, but what this is, it sets it up automatically when you install a project with Python. And it is also very useful when you work on Linux, as we will see later. But the Python virtual environment doesn't have any particular function for us for this application itself, but it enables us to run within a Python environment. So, but let's take a look at the source file. So this is one file that is useful if you want to implement a application that would need to read properties from a property file, and most applications do so. Okay, so a little bit of clarification here. When it comes to Python, which is a very rich language, it has implementation for classes, but it also has implementation for scripts and so forth. So it is a procedural language, but it also is a object-oriented language, depending on which features of the language that you're using, as opposed to, for instance, Java, which is strictly an object-oriented language. Now, what I really like about Python is that I can develop applications using classes, and I can put these classes together and have use an object-oriented design and implementation. So I have developed a property file service, and in this property file service, I also put some comments in here at the class level and also at the method level, and so that you can see what's going on here. So it has, this is a property file service. So you would use this service class for any kind of property file that you would want to read and use in Python. And how can you do that? Well, you can do that because you can pass in the location of the property file in the constructor. So this looks a little bit weird for those of you that are new to Python, but this is how you implement a class constructor in Python. So if you look at it a little bit more closely, it's not that strange. It has this double underscore init, double underscore, and that's how Python interpreter knows that this is a constructor. Then is another thing that's a little bit different with Python is that you have to put the self in as the first argument for each method that you have in a class. So that also goes for the constructor, which is a special type of method that is in a Python class. So you pass in the property file location, and then in here you have different methods. So there's a read method here. This one, this was the one that the client will use, and we'll see that. This is the one that the client will read and will use for reading properties. And you pass in the property section name and the property. So what is the property section name? Okay, so let's review. So go over here. This is section name, and this is a property. So database connection, section name, database.user.id is a property. Okay, so those are the two things you would pass in here. Then it would go and it would read that property. So I put in comments here for what the different methods do. And also I have demonstrated that you can also do inline comments in Python. And we see here that the comments, they are by ampersand. So they start with ampersand, and you can have it inline like this, but you can also, more commonly, people put them here. So I put them here just to demonstrate that if you have something specific or noteworthy going on a particular line, then you can do it there. So anyway, so in the read method, so it does a few things. It needs to get a hold of a property configuration type. So in order to do that, then it goes here and it calls this method, and then it reads, it creates an instance of the config parser, and that config method then is used to read a property. But before it does that, then it needs to have the property file location, and I have split this up to another method here, and it does get the property file location from the instance variable that we created up here, and this is the property file location. So a little bit about the convention in Python, because Python, unlike Java, does not have accessor methods, and so you don't specify like public and protected and private and so forth in the methods, or on top of the methods, as you do in Java. So you would put in front of it here, you would put, for instance, private and then the method name. You don't do that in Python. It doesn't have anything like that. So, but what we do instead is that we program by convention. So we say that things or methods that do not start with an underscore, they are public methods, accessible for anybody. And then we say that, okay, internal methods, they start with underscore, and same thing with properties. So in this case, I have an instance variable or property file location, and I have a self, so that means that it's an instance variable with this class, and also put underscore. So then I can access it anywhere inside the class that I want to. And so coming back here, that is exactly what I'm doing. Get property file location. Okay, so get property file location, and then here I'm getting that, and then I'm returning this property file location. So we're almost done. Now the last thing we need to do is we actually have to read the property here, and then we can return the property. So the get property method here is used to get the specific property for the section that we were looking for. So that's what happens here. So to review this method again quickly, first thing that happens is that first the class gets instantiated, and we will use this constructor for that. Second thing that happens is that after that is constructed, now we have an instance of this class. Now we can start making calls on this, and so we can read the property, and then it will go through the methods as explained, and then in the end you will get back the database user ID. Okay, so let's see how we do this with the test method. So here's the test. So we can also see that I have not checked in all the code yet. You can see here, and we'll get back to it in a later video, how I set this up with PyCharm. And also I'll have more videos on how to walk through and how to use PyCharm, which is an outstanding tool for developing Python programs. So we'll have it in a separate video on the unit testing framework in Python. But let's just demonstrate that we are successful in reading the database user ID. So this class here, which is a test class, we can then in Python highlight this particular method, right mouse click on it, and then we can run this unit test. Now it goes ahead and it reads, and then after it gets back the user ID from the property file, and then it does an assert. Okay, so assert, what that does mean? That means that I am going to check if that value that I got back, which is this one, is what I expected it to be. So I expected that to be user ID. Okay, so if I go over here and I see, yep, that is what it is, user ID. So that's why my test passed. Okay, now just to demonstrate that this actually works, I can go in and I can say, I can put in a fake value here so that now I'm going to force this to fail. Okay, so then I run it again, run, and now we see that it came up with a failure there. And here it says expected database user ID to be DB user ID, and then it says that I expected is different from what I actually get. So here's that expected, actual. So very, very nice framework for testing, for unit testing. I will look at more later. This, to me, is very, very similar to what you have in JUnit in Java. So it's really cool. Let me set it back to what we had before and show that our test is still passing. We're running it. And now we can see that it passed and there was no complaints. So I ran one test and it was very fast. You can see there it's 1/10 of a millisecond, or 2 milliseconds actually. So anyway, that concludes this video, and we'll have lots more as we build out this application. And as I said, the Git repository will be in the description. So thank you very much, and please hit subscribe and like this video, because that helps the algorithm. So we will have this and other videos more in widespread use in the community. Thank you. Bye.